Hello, good afternoon and Salam Malaysia Madani. Thanks for joining us. You're watching World Today. Now, before we begin, here's a brief look at today's top stories. United Nations chief warned that the world body is at risk of imminent financial collapse and could run out of cash by July. He cited unpaid fees and a budget rule that forces the organization to return unspent money. A World Health Organization official explains that the risk of the spread of the Nipah virus is low. None of the over 190 contacts of the two people infected in India tested positive or developed symptoms of the disease. Panama's Supreme Court has annulled contracts allowing a Hong Kong-based company to operate container ports on the Panama Canal. The ruling comes a year after U.S. President Donald Trump claimed China was operating the Panama Canal, the main shipping link between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, in his inaugural speech. The U.S. Senate approved a major government funding package on Friday after the killings of two U.S. citizens by federal agents in Minneapolis upended spending talks and gave the out-of-power party rare leverage over Donald Trump's mass deportation campaign. In a 71-29 tally, the Senate overcame opposition from a handful of Republicans to rally behind a deal the president struck with Democrats, an unusual display of bipartisanship as tensions rise nationally over the presence of ICE agents in U.S. cities. The U.S. Justice Department published a new cache of millions of documents related to the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Deputy Attorney General said the White House played no role in the review of the extensive files. Luigi Mangione will not face the death penalty after a U.S. judge dismissed murder and weapons charges against the accused killer of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. He, however, still faces murder charges in a separate case brought by state prosecutors. The UN nuclear watchdog expressed concern over the ongoing Ukraine conflict, highlighting its significant risks to nuclear safety. An expert mission to Ukrainian substations and power plants is underway and expected to wrap up next month. Nearly 400,000 people have been forced from their homes in southern Mozambique after severe flooding overwhelmed communities and pushed thousands into overcrowded school shelters. UNHCR described the situation as another displacement crisis for Mozambique, highlighting that many families are experiencing their third forced relocation in recent years due to both conflict and extreme weather. Novak Djokovic will face Carlos Alcaraz in the Australian Open men's singles final after beating defending champion Jannik Sinner 3-6, 6-3, 4-6, 6-4, 6-4 in 4 hours and 9 minutes. It was the second epic semi-final of the day after top seed Alcaraz beat third seed Alexander Zverev in the third longest Australian Open match ever, 6-4, 7-6, 6-7, 6-7, 7-5 in 5 hours and 27 minutes to reach his first final at Melbourne Park. Al Nassr's relentless pursuit of the Saudi Pro League title gained fresh momentum early this morning as they dispatched Al Khulud 3-0 at the King Abdullah Sports City Stadium in Buraida. The result, driven by another historic strike from Cristiano Ronaldo and a clinical second-half surge, keeps the Riyadh Giants firmly in contention at the top of the table, now just 3 points adrift of league leaders Al Hilal.
Dunia digital penuh dengan kandungan ganas, eksploitasi kanak-kanak dan buli cyber berleluasa di luar kawalan. Akta Keselamatan dalam Talian 2025 atau AMSA dikuat kuasa untuk melindungi rakyat. Pengguna boleh bertindak atas kandungan yang berisiko. Setiap laporan yang dibuat, platform digital wajib bertindak pantas terhadap penyalahgunaan digital. Dengan AMSA, internet kini lebih selamat untuk kanak-kanak dan keluarga kita.
United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres has warned that the world body is on the brink of financial collapse and could run out of cash by July, as he urged countries to pay their dues. The UN faces chronic budget problems because some member states do not pay their mandatory contributions in full, while others do not pay on time, forcing it into hiring freeze and cutbacks. Guterres said either all member states honor their obligations to pay in full and on time, or they must fundamentally overhaul the financial rules to prevent an imminent financial collapse.
although more than 150 member states paid their dues last year, we ended 2025 with a record $1.56 billion in outstanding dues, which is more than double that of the previous year. So unless either the payments come in or we're not compelled to spend, to return the monies that we are not able to spend because we didn't receive the budget, unless one of those two things happen, we face a real danger of running out of money.
Guterres said unless collections drastically improve, the agency cannot fully execute the 2026 program budget approved in December. Panama's Supreme Court annulled the concession allowing Hong Kong-based CK Hutchison to operate two major container ports at the entrances of the Panama Canal, raising questions over the future management of key logistics hubs along one of the world's most strategic trade routes. The ruling affected Panama Ports Company, a CK Hutchison subsidiary that operated the Balboa Port on the Pacific side and the Cristobal Port on the Atlantic side since 1990s under the contracts separate from the canal's operations. Panama's maritime sector called on authorities to ensure uninterrupted cargo operations following the decision, with Rene Gomez, president of the Panama Maritime Chamber, stating the country must guarantee cargo continues to move without interruption. Gomez also urged the government to clearly communicate next steps to port operators and industry stakeholders in a technical, clear and concise manner. He added that the court's announcement came as a surprise to the sector, which was awaiting the full text of the ruling despite being aware of legal proceedings against the concession. The decision cannot be appealed, though the company may seek clarification from the court or pursue international arbitration. U.S. senators have approved a last-minute deal backed by President Donald Trump to avert the worst impacts of an imminent government shutdown. Now, a shutdown is still set to begin today because the House of Representatives is out of session until Monday, meaning it cannot ratify the upper chamber's agreement before the midnight deadline. Senate leaders said the legislation will, nonetheless, greatly increase the chances that the shutdown ends quickly, potentially within days. The funding impasse has been driven by Democratic anger over aggressive immigration enforcement following the fatal shooting of protesters by federal agents in separate incidents this month in Minneapolis. The deaths have become a flashpoint that has hardened opposition to approving new money for the Department of Homeland Security without changes in the immigration agency's operations. Under the deal negotiated between the White House and Senate Democratic leaders, lawmakers approved 5 outstanding funding bills to finance most of the federal government through the end of the fiscal year in September. Funding for the Department of Homeland Security was split off and extended for just 2 weeks under a stopgap measure intended to give lawmakers time to negotiate changes to the department's operations. U.S. President Donald Trump said he would nominate former Federal Reserve Governor Kevin Warsh to be the next U.S. central bank chief. It is a move that sparked cautious optimism among observers. The decision caps a highly publicized search for a successor to Fed Chair Jerome Powell, whom the president has repeatedly lambasted for not cutting interest rates more swiftly. Trump noted that Warsh certainly wants to cut rates, but added that he does not wish to question Warsh on commitments to do so.
No, but we talk about it, and I've been following them, and I don't want to ask him that question. I think it's inappropriate, probably. It probably would be allowed, but I want to keep it nice and pure. But he certainly wants to cut rates. I've been watching him for a long time.
Warsh was the youngest person to serve as a Fed governor and a role he held from 2006 to 2011. Warsh will need to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate, where he will face tough questions from lawmakers amid growing concerns about threats to Fed independence. The Fed's job has become increasingly challenging as U.S. tariffs fuel worries of stubborn inflation, while the employment market cools. A World Health Organization official explains that the risk of the spread of the Nipah virus is low, saying that none of the over 190 contacts of the 2 people infected in India had tested positive or developed symptoms of the disease.
At present, based on current information, the risk at national, regional, and global levels is considered low. WHO will continue to closely monitor the situation in India and other countries, regularly continuing to assess the risk and provide technical support to local health authorities.
Lagan said the WHO is waiting for India to release the sequence of the virus to assess any possible mutation, but said there was no specific evidence that would make the public worry for the time being. Lagan added that the source of infection is not yet fully understood, as hypotheses such as infection from drinking palm juice or exposure at healthcare facilities are still being considered. Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam and Hong Kong are among the ASEAN locations that tightened airport screening checks this week to guard against such a spread after India confirmed infections. The U.S. Justice Department began releasing millions of new pages from the Jeffrey Epstein files along with photos and videos. This is adding fuel to a politically explosive case that has dogged President Donald Trump. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche said that the White House played no role in the review of the extensive files related to the convicted sex offender, once close friend to Trump. He said some of the documents being released contained untrue and sensationalized claims about Trump submitted to the FBI before the 2020 presidential election. He also dismissed suggestions that potentially embarrassing material about the president had been redacted from the more than 3 million documents, 180,000 images, and 2,000 videos. Previous Justice Department releases have shed light on Epstein's ties to the top business executives, celebrities, academics, and politicians.
The department's collection effort resulted in more than 6 million pages being identified as potentially responsive, including department and FBI emails, interview summaries, images, videos, and various other materials collected and generated during the various investigations and prosecutions that the Act covered.
A federal judge has blocked prosecutors from seeking the death penalty against Luigi Mangione, the man accused of gunning down a health insurance executive in New York in December 2024. Now, the judge dismissed 2 federal charges against Mangione that could carry the death penalty: murder and using a gun with a silencer. The 27-year-old suspect is still charged with 2 counts of stalking in his federal case and separately faces state-level murder charges. Judge Margaret Garnett said the decision is solely to foreclosure the death penalty as an available punishment to be considered by the jury. Mangione could be sentenced to life in prison without parole if convicted of stalking charges. Garnett has given the prosecution until 27 February to file an appeal. The federal trial is to begin with jury selection on 8 September, and the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson quickly captured national attention while exposing public anger with the profit-driven U.S. healthcare system. Mangione was arrested 5 days after the killing in Pennsylvania, some 370 kilometers from the crime scene, following a tip from a staff member. The UN Nuclear Watchdog's Board of Governors discussed nuclear safety in Ukraine, with several countries expressing growing concern following Russian attacks on the power grid. Energy supplies to Ukraine's nuclear plants have been affected as Russia has pounded its neighbor's power sector since the start of its 2022 invasion. The extraordinary meeting was called after 13 countries led the Netherlands expressed a growing concern about the severity and urgency of nuclear safety risks following a series of attacks.
We are all, of course, extremely concerned by the ongoing war, and here at the IAEA on its impact on nuclear safety. We have demonstrated from the start how it is possible to make good use of an international institution like the IAEA to prevent escalation and provide certain stability and predictability in the inevitably fluctuating scenario of an ongoing war.
The next expert mission to Ukrainian substations and power plants is underway and expected to wrap up next month. Grossi said the mission will assess 10 substations crucial to nuclear safety. Poland has signed contracts worth over $4 billion for most modern anti-drone system in Europe to protect its eastern border. Poland, which lies on both NATO and the EU's eastern flank, has in recent years invested heavily to modernize its military following fears of a Russian threat. The system, named SAN, will include 18 anti-drone batteries, 52 firing platoons, 18 command platoons, and around 700 vehicles. It will be fully operational in 2 years.
Publicznie polska granica wschodnia, granica z Rosją i Białorusią to będą najlepiej strzeżone. Już w tej chwili tak można powiedzieć, ale z programem SAN będzie to dotyczyło także powietrza. To będą najlepiej strzeżone granice w Europie.
The contracts signed over Polish public and private companies as well as Norway's Kongsberg. Creating an anti-drone system became an urgent necessity for Poland after Warsaw and its NATO allies had to scramble fighter jets in September when about 20 Russian drones violated Polish airspace. Aerial footage showed vast areas affected by floods in southern Mozambique, with roads and buildings partially submerged and thousands seeking shelter at overcrowded school compounds. According to UNHCR representative Xavier Creech, close to 400,000 people have been forcibly displaced following catastrophic flooding that has affected more than 800,000 people in the country. Creech described the situation as another displacement crisis for Mozambique, highlighting that many families are experiencing their third forced relocation in recent years due to both conflict and extreme weather. The World Weather Attribution Group reported that climate change and La Nina have fueled rainfall so intense that some regions received over a year's rain in just days.
Basic services are lacking. In one of the classrooms that I just visited, 55 women sleep in the same classroom with their children. Lack of light, lack of services, assistance remain insufficient, so tremendous condition for them. It's heartbreaking to listen to their stories. Many of the people I've just spoken are their third displacement.
A fire broke out at Ecuador's largest oil refinery in Esmeraldas, prompting the activation of emergency protocols. Social media users reported an explosion followed by flames and a column of black smoke rising from the facility. State oil company Petroecuador confirmed the fire occurred in a slop pool located in an external area of the refinery. It said firefighting teams responded immediately under the facility's contingency plan. The company said the incident remained under control and no injuries were reported. Refinery operations continued normally with production of petroleum derivatives proceeding as scheduled. Petroecuador indicated that the causes of the fire are under technical evaluation following industrial safety and risk management protocols. The incident renewed public attention on safety at the strategic facility, which experienced a previous fire in May last year that paralyzed the infrastructure for several months and impacted the country's refining system.
Menggosok baju sekaligus boleh menjimatkan elektrik.
Now to some sports news. Novak Djokovic channeled his halcyon days in 5-set classic to dethrone Jannik Sinner and become the oldest man to reach the Australian Open final in the professional era in a game that went into the early hours of Saturday morning. 4 months before his 39th birthday, Djokovic showed he remains unbeatable on his day as he sent the double defending champion packing with a 3-6, 6-3, 4-6, 6-4, 6-4 win. It was hard work and mental toughness that got Djokovic over the line against Sinner, a player who had beaten him in their previous 5 matches. Djokovic will next meet world number 1 Carlos Alcaraz in Sunday's decider. 18 years after his first Melbourne crown, Djokovic will strive for a record-extending 11th against Alcaraz and the unprecedented 25th Grand Slam title that has eluded him. Earlier, Alcaraz fought through a leg issue to deliver a 6-4, 7-6, 6-7, 6-7, 7-5 win over Alexander Zverev and reached his first Australian Open final as the Spaniard somehow managing to keep his career Grand Slam bid alive. The 22-year-old looked concerned and was barely able to move after experiencing a leg issue at 4-4 in the third set, which he lost in a tiebreak, relying on his ball striking and placement to land winners and prolong the contest. Alcaraz continued to battle away, seeing off Zverev in the decider and will aim to recover for a meeting with Djokovic in Sunday's title clash, where a victory will see him complete his set of majors. No stranger to epic 5-setters on the big stage after his French Open final win over Sinner last year, Alcaraz said belief was the key to prevailing in the longest Australian Open semi-final at 5 hours and 27 minutes. Al Nassr moved back into second in the Saudi Pro League earlier this morning with a 3-0 win away at Al Khulud. Al Khulud, meanwhile, sit 14th, 4 points above the relegation zone. After a goalless first half, Cristiano Ronaldo opened the scoring 2 minutes after the break. The goal, Ronaldo's 18th of the season across all competitions, also marked his 17th in the Saudi Pro League campaign. Mohamed Simakan headed in a second from the corner 6 minutes later before the hosts were reduced to 10 men in the 72nd minute when Hatan Bahibri was sent off for elbowing Simakan off the ball. A Kingsley Coman penalty made it 3-0 3 minutes from the end of regulation to wrap up a win that puts Al Nassr second on goal difference ahead of Al Ahly, who take on league leaders Al Hilal on Monday. As the title race heats up, Al Nassr's statement win in Buraida sends a clear message. They're not ready to relinquish their championship dreams just yet. With Ronaldo firing and a squad brimming with attacking talent, the chase is very much on. Up next, burning boat lights up Shetland's Viking Festival. Hundreds of people in Scotland's Shetland Islands marched through the town of Lerwick, carrying flaming torches to mark the ancient Viking festival of Uphelja. People lined the streets holding lit torches, while others carried their torches in a procession toward a replica of a Viking longship or galley, which had been dragged to a burning site. The torches were then hurled onto the ship to set it alight. Earlier in the day, people dressed as Viking warriors and Scottish pipers marched through the town. While Uphelja, in its current form of fire, feasting and fancy dress, has been going on for more than 140 years. The roots of the festival go back more than 12 centuries. The torch procession harks back to the pagan Norse rituals at the cremation of chieftains and the religious ceremonies to mark the sun's return after the winter solstice. Set in the near future, a detective accused of murdering his wife has just 90 minutes to prove his innocence to an advanced AI judge. Starring Chris Pratt, who leads a solid cast with Rebecca Ferguson as the AI judge, adding a chilling, futuristic presence. The high-stakes premise keeps the tension ticking from the start. Visually, the film is sleek and tech-forward, with digital courtrooms and futuristic evidence creating a unique, modern look. The lead performances are solid, though much of the story unfolds through screens and interfaces, giving the film a distinctive, if occasionally static feel. Still, Mercy offers an intriguing take on AI, justice, and human resilience. Fans of tech-driven thrillers will find it stylish, thought-provoking, and worth a watch. Directed by Timur Bekmambetov and written by Marco Van Bell, Mercy explores AI, justice, and human resilience in a thought-provoking way. The sci-fi thriller film is now showing in cinemas. With just about a week until the start of the Olympic Winter Games, the center of northern Italy's town, Ortisei, has turned into an exhibition for Olympics-themed ice sculptures being built live. Artists carved sculptures depicting motifs such as the Olympic torches, rings, and skiers. The artworks were created with tools such as hammers, chisels, chainsaws, and gas burners, while residents and visitors watched the live sculpting and formation. They were part of a competition spanning various towns in Ortisei's Valley Val Gardena. The valley in which Ortisei is situated is famous for its long tradition of wood carving, an art form which goes back to the 17th century. Handmade sculptures are an important contribution to the economic growth of the Val Gardena Valley, leading to the foundation of several specialized schools to pass on the craft of wood carving. Organizers of the annual ice carving event said they were inspired to dedicate this year's edition of the Olympics. The Olympic Winter Games Milano Cortina 2026 will run from 6th to 22nd February. Well, that concludes today's edition of World Today. Till then, I'm Otto Othman, Salam Malaysia Madani, and have a great day ahead.